Okay, we got about 1 minute. We're going to start on time tonight. And so we're going to give them about 1 minute and then we're going to start. And then I'm sure people will be joining us running late, but we're not going to keep you longer than what we agreed to do that. Okay, so it looks like we're getting a little bit of a crowd. Felicia, were you able to hear us? Just raise your hand if you are. Okay, good. Lost you just a minute there. Jerron, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Jerron? Raise your hand if you can hear us. Okay, so we're going to get started because we don't want to keep our guest very long. It's a lot longer than normal. Where he's at is 9 o'clock at night. So I'm amazed that he is upright and able to communicate with us. We're so glad that you joined us for our first hospitality Zoom. There may be others that are joining us as we go. You'll hear that doorbell. We'll just let them join in. If they have issues, they'll have to chat with us because we're not going to stop to check to see if they can hear us or see us. But we are glad that you've joined us. We're excited about that. I just want to go over just a 1 minute of maybe some Zoom etiquette. Sometimes when we're on a big group like this, you know, you're doing your thing. And so maybe if you decide that you need to do something, probably the best thing to do is just to you don't turn your sound off, just turn your video off. It's kind of distracting for the speaker. Maybe not them, but for me, it's real distracting. I really want to know what you're doing. And so if you're going to get up and move around a whole lot, if you could just shut your video off and then turn it back on when you're ready to sit down. We have everybody muted as they came in. That's just because that helps. Sometimes the background noise in your home, you don't hear, but we always hear it. And so we just want to make sure that we don't disrupt any of this. And so we're glad you joined. Our guest today is Greg Atkinson. He wrote a couple of books. One is The Secret Shopper for Churches. And that was a very popular book. And then he did the Ministry Volunteer Handbook, Hospitality Ministry. So when I found the book, someone told me about it. I found it. I was really impressed. And so I just contacted him and asked if he would just speak to us for just a few minutes. So I hope you all can hear, but we're going to give Greg the floor or the screen and let him just speak to us for a little bit and then write down your questions, because whenever he's done, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions and find out what's going on. So Greg, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it is 9 p.m. and I'm honored to be here. My latest book was the Hospitality Handbook for Volunteers, and then Secrets of a Secret Shopper has been out now, I think 2 or 3 years, and somebody just emailed me yesterday asking they wanted to order 225 copies for their staff and volunteers, and that's publisher, but it's still doing well. I put together, I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see some scripture references that I put together a little presentation. This is the book that I mentioned that goes into all aspects of hospitality and first impressions when I go out and do secret shoppers for churches. I was in California last week. I'll be in Baltimore in 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that, I'll be in Minneapolis. And so love going out and working with churches. But as you lead a hospitality ministry at your church, whether you're in a formal position like an usher or a parking lot, staff person that oversees it, or a volunteer, or just a congregation member, I want to make sure you have a healthy view theologically, practically, hospitality, and how God can use it. I always talk about God has given us spiritual gifts, and one way that you can use your spiritual gifts in the local church is through hospitality. And I always talk about the golden rule: whatever you do, wish that others would do to you, do also to them. And then the great commandment is God with all your heart, but also love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so when I go out and teach and speak at churches, I'll talk about what a great churches have in common. And the thing that I found over 15 years of consulting with over 200 churches is they plan for and expect guests. The best churches I've worked with, those that are the most healthy, vibrant, thriving, growing, busting at the seams, they plan for and expect guests. Because in reality, every Sunday is someone's first Sunday. Depending on the size of your church, every Sunday could be somebody's first Sunday. But when I was a campus pastor at a multi-site church, I was at a small campus in a city of 13,000. We averaged about 150 people, and we had 6 to 8 guests a week at a campus of 150 people. So every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. I want to share with you just a brief concept that I call the one-day principle. If somebody were to come to your church this weekend, what would you want them to experience on their one day with you? When you are serving, when you get together, when you gather your volunteers in the morning, when you do a huddle, hopefully you do a huddle before your first service, you gather everybody together, link arms, look in the eye, put your game face on and say, today is somebody's first Sunday. Today could be somebody's one day. In Acts 3, there's a story of one day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 p.m. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. This is important. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk." Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. So a couple of thoughts about the one-day principle. We look guests in the eyes. This is just practical tips that you can use as you train your volunteers. Looking guests in the eyes, acknowledging a person by simply looking them in the eyes, expressing respect, interest, appreciation, and understanding. Second, we speak positive words. Using encouraging words can have a life-changing effect on the person who hears them. And third, we focus on individuals. Treating guests as individuals helps them feel like they are part of the community, not lost in a crowd. One of the things that I have found in my travel and in my coaching pastors and in my consulting is most church volunteers have lost their why. And so I always will ask people, do you know your why? Do you know your purpose? One of my quotes in my last book, The Hospitality Handbook, is, if your ushers can be replaced with a table, they're doing it wrong. Meaning, if I can just set a table out and set bulletins on it and people walk by and pick up a bulletin, if that's your only purpose in life on a Sunday morning is to hand somebody a bulletin, you're doing it wrong. A table can give somebody a bulletin. And so ask people, do they know their why? It's where you always start when it comes to training. When you train your volunteers, you want to always start with the why. Simon Sinek, in a famous TED Talk, said people will do almost any what if they know their why. And so I want to share with you just a brief video from a comedian named Michael Jr. That really kind of nails this point home, and I think it'll be meaningful to you.
Series is called How Do I Know? And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know? The next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what. The key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We're in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour, hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at school. I was like, all right, you teach music, can you sing? And then I'm just gonna show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? Now, once you give me the version, if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid, I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick. If you know what version I'm talking about, just see if that exists. Let me see what you got. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right now I'm found blind, but now I see. So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
I love that. So when I work with churches, I try to remind them of their why. I was just at a church in Southern California, and I walked in between readers that were in conversation with each other and totally ignored me. They had their hand out, giving me a bulletin as I was coming through, but I was walking between their conversation. And then I was, about a month or two ago, I was in Pittsburgh, and I took a picture of some ushers that were huddled up talking to each other, kind of together in a clump, talking. And I told the executive pastor that brought me in, they forgot their why. And so I mentioned that things that great churches have in common is they plan for and expect guests. And so when you have company over, what do? You sweep, you vacuum, you put away the laundry, you dust, you light a candle, you clean house, you prepare for company to come. And so that's something we want to always remind people. This is a quote that I love. Hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom not disturbed by dividing lines. This is Henry Nouwen. And so this is something that I love talking about when we focus on something like a webinar like this, focusing on the topic of hospitality. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. We know it's God and the Holy Spirit that changes hearts, that draws men and women to himself, but we can create these space, these environments where people can meet the living God. And so when we talk about our why and remembering our why and our purpose, we have to get back to, why does hospitality even matter? And my argument that I make in both of my books, Secrets of a Secret Shopper and the Hospitality Handbook for Volunteers, is that it's a biblical mandate. And I'm just going to read a couple of thoughts. While hospitality may sometimes be perceived as a unique gifting for some people, Scripture is clear that loving strangers is a biblical mandate to anyone who follows Jesus. Throughout the Old and New Testaments, God specifically commands his people to practice hospitality. In Leviticus, he talks about welcoming the stranger. In some translations, it says welcoming the newcomer. So we have that in the Old Testament. Many years later in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus talks about hospitable behavior. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger. There's that word again, stranger. And you invited me in. Naked, you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And then when we welcome the newcomer and the least of these and treat them as valued guests, we welcome Christ himself. And like so much of 1 John shows us, when we love others, we show our love for God. Something I always emphasize is hospitality is also a specific hallmark for church leaders. You can't even be a pastor unless you're hospitable. If you study 1 Timothy and Titus, when it talks about the qualifications of elders, being hospitable is one of the qualifications for being an elder. That's how serious that God takes the subject of hospitality. Romans 12:13, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. 1 Peter 4:9, be hospitable to one another without complaint. Hebrews 13:12, so we've gone from Leviticus, welcome the stranger, to Jesus in Matthew saying, I was a stranger, you invited me in. And then in Hebrews 13, let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. How do we translate strangers in today's terms? It would be a newcomer, a guest, somebody visiting our worship experience, our gathering on a weekend. It could also mean your neighbor and a lot of other things. But when a newcomer comes into our facility, how do we welcome them? So hospitality is from beginning to the end. And so what I do a lot of times to get people thinking, and this is an exercise you can do with your team when you do a training or a huddle, is just to ask your team, when was the last time you visited a church? I think one of the biggest issues I have found, and I was just with this church where the pastor had been there 30 years and the executive pastor that had brought me in had been there 15 years, and they never, ever miss. And so some of the things I pointed out were so simple, but they just don't miss their church. And so a lot of times I'll say, when was the last time you visited a church? What was it like? What did you feel? What did you experience? Were you nervous? Was it awkward? Did you get lost? Were you confused? And so reminding people about the last time they were a guest, when they were the stranger. And that's something that brings me to this article I wrote for Christianity Today, where I talk about the cringe factor. We as church leaders and pastors, we will often encourage our lay people, our congregation, to invite our friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, classmates to church. We'll say, if you would invite your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, classmates to church, we will tell them about Jesus. And so you have a faithful church member that takes a step of faith, and they invite this neighbor they've been building a relationship with for 2 years, and they invite him to church. And when they invite them to church, that's when the cringe factor sets in. They want everything to be perfect. I don't know when the last time you invited a special guest to church, you invited a lost friend or family member or coworker or neighbor to church, but that is when the cringe factor sets in. That's when you want everything to be perfect, and you're scared if that greeter that just shakes the hand a little bit too long and just won't let go and keeps holding and holding and holding and talking and talking. You want everything to be perfect, and you want somebody to be smiling and waving in the parking lot. You want your kids, your guest kids, to get checked in efficiently at the children's check-in. And then you sit down in the auditorium and you think, is anybody going to come over and talk to us? Tom Rainer, in his last book, did a huge research study with Lifeway, and he said once people got through the parking lot, through the greeters, through the ushers, and they sat down in the auditorium, the number one reason they found that guests did not return was because nobody talked to them in the auditorium. So in my hospitality handbook, I have a chapter on section hosts, where people kind of man a section in an auditorium and get to know people in that area. But you want people to talk to you or to your guests, and to not be invisible. And then you think about stuff like, oh my gosh, is the pastor going to talk about money this week? Is the music going to be good? Like, you want everything to be great. That is the cringe factor. And so if you have that in your heart each week as you gather, this will hit close to home to you. And so here's a couple values that I have that I like sharing with people. I value people, excellence, honor, respect, love, compassion, grace, and hospitality. As we talked about, hospitality is a biblical mandate. And the thing about excellence is excellence transcends. I said this on Carrie Newhouse podcast. It doesn't matter if you're a rural church, a suburban church, a city church. It doesn't matter if you're a small church, a large church. It doesn't matter if you're Baptist or Assemblies of God. It doesn't matter if you're Methodist or Presbyterian. Excellence transcends. Style doesn't matter. And so if your church has a pipe organ, do it to the glory of God with excellence. If your church has choir and orchestra, do it to the glory of God with excellence. If your church has a rocking band and you rock people's faces off, do it to the glory of God with excellence. And so when I come in as a secret shopper, I don't come in with my own preferences. I don't come in with my own personal taste. I just look in as a former worship pastor and technical director and campus pastor. I'm looking at, are they doing this with excellence? Are they doing this? Have they practiced, and are they prepared, and are they ready for company? We talked about being prepared for company. So last couple of food for thought: never embarrass your people. If you ask them to invite somebody, that's a big step of faith for somebody. And so remember the cringe factor and fight for excellence in all areas of the church's ministry. And then I always talk about, and I talk about this in Secrets of a Secret Shopper, never assume people know anything. That's why signage is so important. I could come to your church and honestly not be able to know where the restrooms were. I have gone to churches where I couldn't find the auditorium. I had no idea where the worship center was. So never assume people know anything. And then something that I am passionate about is when I think of first impressions and I think of hospitality, it's not just a first impression of your local congregation, your local church. You may be somebody's first impression of Christianity. You may be somebody's first impression of a Christ follower. And so when we welcome people each weekend, we want to take this very, very seriously. Remember the golden rule and the great commandment that we started with. Remember the cringe factor. Be kind, be gentle, be caring, be loving, be hospitable. Love well, serve well, welcome all. And then I'm going to pause for, I think Linda has some questions or anything you want to do. I'm here. I just wanted to kind of start with a little bit of a framework for hospitality and why I'm passionate about it.
Okay, that was great. So we want to take some time for you to be able to ask questions. If you've joined in, maybe you are the leader of your hospitality team at your church. Maybe you just like people. Maybe you have some questions. So for anybody that has questions, first one to speak gets to ask the question. Anybody got any questions?
Hey, Greg, I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I think I'm unmuted.
You are. You're good.
Okay. I know a lot of times, even thinking about hospitality, people who are on this call probably are, maybe doing okay at the beginning of church. And like you said, a lot of people don't talk to someone sitting in the pew or the chairs. What is some ideas that you've seen work as people are leaving a church setting? I feel like that's where, a lot of times we would drop the ball is, people tend to group up and talk at that point, and then visitors slip away, guests will slip away. What are some things that you've seen that work good on the tail end, besides maybe just a sign that says, we're glad you came? We want them to really know that through our actions. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so a number of different ideas. One, when it comes to your volunteers, we talk about bookending. So you have people that greet you and welcome you when you walk up, and then they say goodbye, have a great week, thanks for coming when they leave. When I'm serving as a greeter or in the parking lot, I serve before the service and after the service and during the service. And so if your service starts at 11, the person that arrives at 11:30 is just as worthy to be welcomed. And so there should be somebody there at the door to welcome them. But when guests go, when anybody in the congregation leaves, there should be greeters holding the doors open saying goodbye, thanks for coming, have a great week. And then your parking team is not just for as cars arrive, it is in the parking lot afterwards, waving goodbye and saying have a great week and directing traffic. And a lot of churches I work with have traffic congestion. But another thing is making your staff available to be able to greet people. I always evaluate or look for, is the pastor available or key staff available? I was at a very large church in Pittsburgh about a month and a half ago, and they had a 10-minute party after the service. They had a giant lobby and these banners, this 10-minute party that were set up where Mosaic in LA, or McManus has the after party. Some people have a VIP thing. Some people have a meet the pastor, like First Baptist Dallas, there's a meet the pastor. But having a designated place afterwards where you can go and meet staff and the lead pastor is good. But keeping your volunteers in their position before, during, and after the service.
That's good. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Hi, my name's David. Got a question on the greeting as they enter. How many times typically would you suggest a new visitor has to be greeted before they actually step into the sanctuary? Is there a magic number? Do you greet them 3 times from the parking lot, from the curb to the front door to the sanctuary? Or I've heard this thing about 3 is a magic number. What typically would be something you would recommend, Greg?
It really depends on the size of your campus, the size of your facility. So I was recently consulting and coaching and training at First Baptist Orlando. Their campus is 100 acres, so it can take 20 minutes just to get to the auditorium. So it depends on if it's one and done, that's a lonely 20 minutes. Whereas if I can park in your parking lot in 5 minutes, be in the door, then you may not want any more than 3. But basically, it depends on where people are positioned. So if somebody's in the parking lot, you want to say good morning and welcome. And then if somebody approaches the outer doors and somebody opens the door up, good morning and welcome. but you also have to read body language, and you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to have overkill. And then also, I always talk about body language in both of my books when it comes to hugging. Some people don't want to be hugged.
Yes.
But and then I was at a very well-known large church years ago with a well-known pastor, and they host conferences, and I had to walk through a wall of greeters to get inside. It was very difficult to get inside. I had to shake about 20 hands, and so you can definitely overdo it. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Great question. Any more questions? Just speak up. If not, I've got some. Okay, so let's talk about big weekends. You know, we all have those big weekends every year, Easter, Christmas, maybe another special weekend. What is different those weekends versus just a typical weekend?
Yeah. So the cool thing about big weekends, which I get excited for just like you do, is most churches in North America are 200 people or smaller. And so that's where the quote, every Sunday is somebody's Sunday, I sometimes will tweak to every Sunday could be somebody's Sunday. However, on a big event weekend, every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. And so when it comes to Christmas, Christmas Eve, Easter, those are times where churches see first-time guests for sure. And so if it's a typical Sunday in February, like this Sunday or last Sunday, you may have had a Sunday where you didn't have a first-time guest, or maybe yours are a little more sporadic, or you didn't have as many, but you will probably have the most you're going to have all year at Christmas and Easter. And so that makes it, to me, very significant. And then that also means I have to prepare for company, and we have to do everything we can to think through it strategically and to be prepared as possible for them. And even if you don't do it weekly, before those big event weekends, have a huddle with your team, gather together, link arms, look each other in the eye and say, today is somebody's first Sunday. Let's be the hands and feet of Christ to them and love them and serve them well.
That's good stuff.
Another question.
Okay, go ahead.
How religious do you need to be when you say goodbye on the exit greeting? I've told our greeters, you don't know if they're under conviction after the service. You don't know what's going on in their hearts and minds. You don't want to say have a blessed weekend. This is such a cliche. I have told them just say have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
Is there anything else you want to add to that? Because we're an Assemblies of God church, and we don't want to be too Pentecostal in their face as they leave.
I would just say that I agree. You can just simply say, thanks for coming, have a great week. You don't have to be overly religious. Absolutely. Okay. I agree.
Great, thank you.
David, what church are you from?
Friendship Assembly of God in Colorado Springs.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
I've got another question. Are you seeing a trend with, like guest gifts? I used to do like maybe popcorn or a movie like Redbox, or maybe it's a gift bag. Maybe it's the pastor's favorite 5 sermons. Man, are you seeing, is that kind of going away? Is that something that's still active and good? Is it something that you'd recommend? Is there again, kind of like, not to say some magic gift, but I mean, is there something that you're seeing across these trends that are working?
Yeah, I can answer that a number of ways. One, it is still very much used. It's very popular. It all, when it comes to first impressions, what I'm passionate about is first-time guests turning into second-time guests, turning into third-time guests, and getting plugged into the local body so that they can grow in their faith and develop their spiritual walk and grow in spiritual maturity. And so our ultimate goal is to see people get discipled, and we can't disciple them if they don't come back. And so one of the key ways to start that process of assimilation and follow-up is through data. And a great way to collect data is that transfer of, when you turn in your connection card, we have a gift for you. And so it's a very popular tactic used across North America. I have a resource, I have a PDF book I put together. It's a very simple booklet, actually, that Linda, if you email me and remind me, I'll email it to you to send out. But it is some unconventional guest gifts beyond a coffee mug. Things that maybe you haven't thought of. One thing is, when you asked about trends, one thing that is very popular right now, because there's a lot of schools of thought out there, and I have peers and friends that love coffee mugs and T-shirts. This, by the way, is what our greeters wear at my church. I'm a part of a local church plant. We average about 50 people on a Sunday, and this is what our greeters wear. It just says hello. But one of the things that is debated is should it be a coffee mug or a T-shirt, or should it be more creative? And one of the trends I'm seeing now that is popular is when people say we will donate a certain amount of money to a charity in your name. And so if you have a local charity in your community, maybe a food pantry or a crisis pregnancy center or something like that, you can say, when you turn in your connection card, we'll make a $5 donation to the Crisis Pregnancy Center in your name. And that seems to be really popular, especially with millennials.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great idea. I like that. I was going to ask that. So great minds think alike. Okay, so in your book, you talk just a little bit about appearance, and I think we could segue to that with that shirt. And so what is important about that? I mean, is there something really important about what we're wearing?
There is something important about what we're wearing. You know, in my new book, which I think you just read, the Hospitality Handbook, I talk about team unity. And, you know, if everybody wears lanyards, then everybody should have lanyards. If everybody wears T-shirts, then everybody should wear T-shirts. But having that spirit of unity where it all, everybody looks alike. I have been to very contemporary modern churches where the ushers were wearing T-shirts like I'm wearing, and then there was one dude in a three-piece suit, and he just looked out of place, and it just throws everything off. And so appearance is important. The thing about uniforms is uniformity. It gives a sense of this is a team environment. A lot of churches around the country use the term dream team to refer to their volunteers. That's something very popular right now. Our volunteers are called the dream team, and we have a dream team huddle before the service. And when it comes to recruiting volunteers, a big thing that is attractive to a potential volunteer is seeing teams in different shirts. You know, if your kids ministry has kids shirts, then your ushers have shirts, and your parking has shirts, and your greeters have shirts, and your tech team has black shirts that say production. And, you know, when people see the different teams formed, a lot of times that is attractive to people to say, you know, hey, we need to get involved and start to serve somehow. But yeah, I think it's important.
Good. I think so too. We're the dream team at our church too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? We don't want you to go away saying, man, I really thought I was going to get this from the training and I didn't. And so if you have a question, you're welcome to put it on the chat and I'll ask it for you, or just you can ask it because we want your questions to be answered tonight.
I'll also say, you know, you were kind enough to mention my two most recent books earlier, Secrets of a Secret Shopper and the Hospitality Handbook for Volunteers. And I wrote those because it's a lot cheaper than hiring me. You can pay thousands of dollars to fly me to your church, or you can pay $5 and download it on Kindle tonight and have it read by tomorrow, or pay $10 and in 1 to 2 days have Amazon ship you a paperback. But my heart was knowing that most churches in North America are 200 people or less. Most people, even if they wanted to, don't have the resources and the budget to fly in a consultant So I said, let me put everything that I would say in person in a book form, and they can pay $10 and get that. And it's got just a lot of info that should be helpful to people, because I am very aware that not everybody can hire a consultant to come in.
Right.
And so a lot of times people don't even know what to ask until they read something like that. And so there may be more questions later down the road for a follow-up after reading some of those books. But
And so this is the one that we're referring to. It's on my iPad. It's blue. That's the one that I downloaded, and it's just called Hospitality Ministry, Equipping You to Serve. It's a volunteer handbook. I found it on Amazon. I downloaded it on my Kindle, and so I have it with me all the time. If you would like, I'm going to email and get the resource, the gift resource thing that he asked. And if you would like me to email it to you, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says chat. If you hit that and just put your email in that chat screen, I will be sure and add you to that email list, and I'll send that to you as well. And so if there's not any more questions, anybody else got anything they want to ask? Okay, go ahead, David.
Again, this was with regard to the entry greeting. Is there a right and wrong answer question when a guest comes in? I recently told them, I said, no, we don't want to ask them, is this your first time?
right.
Or are you a visitor here? Rather say, I don't think we met before. My name is there anything else that you suggest, Greg?
I think you should be teaching this seminar, man. You got some great thoughts. Yeah, you don't want to say, is this your first time? That's a big no-no. You either say, hey, I don't think we've met yet. My name's Greg. What's your name? Or how long have you been worshiping with us? Actually, it's our first week. Oh, really? Wow. Can I show you where to go? Because what happens is a lot of times in a church, people will get confused or get lost in a crowd. And so you'll say, is this your first time worshiping with us? No, we've been here 3 years. And they get upset. Yeah, so you got it. Don't ask if it's their first time.
Yes. We've had a very traditional church, and some of the older folks who are still greeters always have asked that question as their lead question when someone walks in. So yeah, changing that was
good intent, but you could ask that to the wrong person. It's been there for 6 months and they feel upset, and yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
David, I can tell you're really passionate about what you do at Friendship.
I am.
You are. Absolutely. You need to get this book. You'll love it.
Okay, I will too.
Absolutely. So any more questions? We just want everyone to have their questions answered.
I did a secret shopper years ago in Colorado Springs at New Life with Brady Boyd.
Okay.
They have a greet the pastor time afterwards where he's available and shaking hands, and kind of a separate designated spot where guests can go meet Brady and shake him and shake his hand and pray with him and all that. But I love Colorado. You're
always welcome.
Went on vacation there a couple years ago.
Yeah, we love it too. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Greg, for staying up late to just visit with us. We love what you had to say.
Yes.
I have taken a ton of notes, even though I know this has been recorded. I just think it's all good stuff. And I think what we're talking about is so important for people to feel like they have been seen, and that someone cared that they were there. And I think that's very important. So we just thank you for that. Thank you, the rest of you, for joining us tonight. That just makes my night to be able to see you and to know that you care about hospitality. If you hit that chat button and you gave me your email address, I am going to email you that resource when he sends it to me. And so if there's not any more questions, I guess we're done for the night.
Thanks, Linda.
Everybody good?
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
All righty.
Thank you, Greg.
Good night.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.